Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am very excited about today's guest. I think I can safely say that in over 1,200 episodes, this is the first astrophysicist that we've got here on the air. And I'm so fascinated not only by his background, but especially how he's taken all of that and applied it to a really cool business that, truth be told, we're not talking about astrophysics today. You're going to see how much his business is towards our own personal development, our own personal growth, accountability, habit tracking, a lot of good stuff behind today's guest business. So let me introduce you to Jake Hartman. Now, typically I go over somebody's bio, but Jake has so many interesting tidbits that I'll just tell you a few random things and you can try to piece it together, but he'll take us beyond it all. He studied undergrad at Penn State, majoring in math and physics. He worked at IBM Research for 2 years after undergrad, where no biggie, he just did some really cool things building early computer vision based interfaces for people with limited motion control. He then went on to grad school at MIT, earning a PhD in astrophysics. His thesis is on the time domain analysis of rapidly spinning X-ray pulsars, which I think surprisingly ties in with his business, but I'll let him bridge that gap for us. He also did astrophysics postdocs at the Naval Research Lab in DC, the University of New Mexico, JPL, and Caltech. In his postdoc career, he pivoted to radio astronomy because he likes building things, and you'll see that as an entrepreneur, he continues to build things. He left academia to work at Google for 5 years. Then he missed talking about astrophysics, so he's quit Google and got a job at Pasadena City College teaching astronomy and physics. But of course, then the pandemic happened and all of that threw everything in the air. And that's why I'm so fascinated by what he's built as an entrepreneur, because his company, QBuzz, is an app that builds longitudinal surveys, ones that are meant to be taken repeatedly. You can think about it. A lot of us have heard of SurveyMonkey. Think about SurveyMonkey, but also layered on with reminders, goals, time domain analysis, sharing and social features, rich data types that can include pictures, GPS tags, video, lots of good stuff. I'm very excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Jake Hartman. All right, Jake, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Brian, for the very kind intro.
Heck yes, it was a fun intro, and I will say it's a very different intro because you have so many parts of your story that I'm excited to hear about from you personally. So let's start there. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Jake? How did you get into all these cool and very smart and brilliant things?
I just grew up being interested in space, interested in computers. I mean, hey man, it was the 1980s. There's Space Shuttle, Commodore 64, and I got into all that stuff. And so I've just kind of had a career of going back and forth between computers, space, science. But I'm particularly psyched about QBuzz because this is one of the kind of taking all that rather abstract stuff and trying to put it in a more social domain. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. So yeah, how did I get here? Well, I guess of all those disparate things that Brian ticked off, I guess one of the main common threads is that I've always been interested in looking at how things change over time. Like when I was in astro, I was doing X-ray astrophysics. I was looking at how neutron stars, the cores left over when supermassive stars explode, how they evolve over time, because they too have lives with changes. And getting that signal out of really complex data sets, that was difficult. That's what I ultimately did my thesis on. And then later, I was at Google, and I worked on Google Drive, and I, again, was looking at how people were interacting with Drive, trying to do that in a very security-minded way, and that's another thing which is key to QBuzz, just making sure, if we're going to be tracking your social information, we need that to be as secure as possible. So, again, but looking at how different types of data change over time. And okay, that's all well and good. But then I got into, I went back into teaching. The pandemic happened. I found myself pretty depressed. I was drinking too much. It was not a good scene. But, just like anyone all of our emotions are constantly going up and down. And we all know that, but we don't necessarily know how they're going up and down. Or, if you're struggling with drinking, you might know that you maybe are having too much, but you don't exactly know how much. So I started taking notes of that. And every time I had a drink, I noted it. Every time I went to bed, I noted kind of how the day had been. And honestly, by tracking this data and kind of seeing sort of the rhythms of my own life, I was able to see patterns. And that helped me. Being able to see that, I've got my ups and downs, but all right now I'm not feeling good. But a month ago, I wasn't feeling good. Similar things were happening. It got better. And here's kind of what helped it get better, because I'm taking little notes as well. For me personally, that was incredibly powerful. And that, in combination with all the normal stuff, therapy and whatever, therapy and just good self-care, I beat that depression. I'm feeling 1,000 times better. And I decided this is a cool tool. And yeah, let's use it. Let's try to make an app out of it so other people can use it. And I guess in that origin story, I'm sort of highlighting these dark things of drinking and depression and such, but really it can be used for anything. And since then, I've been, you go out on a hike. I love hiking. The San Gabriel Mountains north of LA, where I live, are just fantastic. So go out on a hike and like, oh, when's the last time I hiked this trail? And boop, okay, well, I just make a recording on my phone here. Takes moments. And that's the thing about QBuzz. You can write down anything you want. You just kind of run through the how does it work. You start off by picking a couple of questions or writing a couple of questions. There's a whole menu of them you can choose from. Then you set reminders to take them repeatedly, and then it gives you data analysis tools to pick out the trends. And finally, you're able to share both the questionnaires and also the results with others, for instance, an accountability buddy or even your doctor once I set up HIPAA compliance. Still in the works. This is still in beta. So there you go. That's pretty much how I got there and what the app is.
Yeah, I love that overview, Jake, for so many reasons. But first of all, I'll reveal this to you while we're on the air together, is that when I was prepping for you and I to get together today in our conversation, the more I looked into QBuzz, the more that came to me is that entrepreneurial concept and personal development concept of the weights don't change, we do. And that's something that's so fun about working out, using weights as the example, is that, if you and I pick up a heavy weight today, it's going to feel very heavy. We keep picking it up, and all of a sudden over time, it's going to feel so much lighter, but it's not because the weight changed. It's of course because we change. And to me, that's what, as soon as I saw that your verbiage about longitudinal surveys in my head, I was just like, that's the cool thing, is that it's a really unique way for us to look back and see that progression. Now with weights, it's much easier, but in business, in life, in relationships, it's not so easy to track that progress. And it's cool to hear that your personal backstory is you built something that served you successfully. Talk to me about the different, there's two directions that I really want to go in. One is the different features that you built into it, because you obviously used it for your own benefit first. And so I'm curious what you thought to yourself, ooh, let's layer that in because that's going to help people get results. And then secondly, what I'm curious about is how you decided or how you imagined, because you're not deciding this stuff, how you imagined the many different use cases, because you have to build the two in tandem. You have to think about the use cases to know the features. How are you shaking all this stuff out in your head?
Boy, it is a learning experience as I go. To answer your first question, where do these features come from? I mean, you pretty much said it. I made it basically using it myself and finding things that worked, finding things that didn't, finding friction points. I mean, originally I had this ambitious thing, the phone would buzz 10 times a day randomly, and then there'd be this whole questionnaire, and no, I'm not doing that. So, just by, and I think that's probably true for most people. And incidentally, I want to get there, but I think the way that is a smartwatch things so you can answer the questions very quickly. That's a feature that I want to get to next, minimizing friction that way. Just through personal use, and then I started giving it to other people. I gave it to my dad, and he's thankfully not dealing with depression, but he has a lot of cats, and it's sometimes hard to keep track of which ones he's fed. So he made a little cat tracker to see which cats he's feeding, and there are just all sorts of directions that you can go in. And really, so far, we've been talking about personal ones, but you can even imagine it as a business tool, a very quick make a point of sale survey to track this, that, or the other customer relation thing over time. Just kind of thinking about these things, talking to people, seeing what they've used it for, family and friends. That's pretty much how it's come together.
Yeah, I love that. It makes the business geek in me wonder how that shapes your go-to-market strategy, because you're right. I can think of a million use cases personally and professionally. It's funny, probably 5 years ago, I was searching relentlessly. The search came up empty, I think until today with QBuzz. But I was searching relentlessly for a to-do list that can have recurring tasks. There's certain things that I have to do every day, Jake. I have to go through my email inbox. As much as I don't want to, I have to. I have to check in with my team on Slack. There's certain things that I have to do. Why doesn't a task list just tell me that? Because I can tell it I need this recurring task. It was so hard to even find something that had that, what seems to me, I'm oversimplifying it, but it seems like really basic functionality. So with that in mind, you could plug a lot of these different holes, especially with that use case I just gave. How does it factor into your go-to-market strategy? Because obviously you want a bunch of people to be using it. Are you honing in on a certain market? Are you honing in on a certain use case? You're the first and only guest in over 1,200 episodes that rebuilt our guest questionnaire survey and sent it to me with your own tool, which I love that. I'm giving listeners that behind the scenes. But talk to us about how you're starting to focus on which markets to talk to.
Yeah, so again, this was largely driven by my own personal experience. Well, that's not strictly true. I'm first going in the personal direction. This is an accountability tracker. This is something that you can use for your pets, for hikes, for all of these personal things. And that's step one, because that's the easiest thing to do, but also because it worked for me and because I'm hopeful it'll help people. I mean, like I said earlier, this time domain analysis is an incredibly powerful tool. It's something that companies are using on us constantly. I mean, Google probably knows more about your habits than you do, unless you are very dedicated about tracking things like QBuzz allows you to do. It was my hope that by doing this in a personal direction, it would be able to, well, first, find an audience relatively quickly, and second, be able to do some real good in the world. So to that end, I have, I'm excited, just literally yesterday, I started my first big ad campaign. It is on Reddit, and it is targeting like productivity, self-improvement subreddits. Beyond that, I might go more specific. For instance, tracking what you eat and what comes out is very important if you've got IBD or IBS. I know that has also helped people, personally in my family. And so maybe on that kind of forum as well, once we start having more specific pre-built surveys that I can start advertising. But for the moment, just sort of general productivity and personal tracking.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love the way you answer that, because you hit us with both the strategic and the tactical. The fact that as a diehard Redditor, I love the fact that you're penetrating that market there. My mind immediately went to the productivity subreddit, and that feels like a match made in heaven for what it is that you've built. I want to go into your personal story a little bit more, Jake. A lot of people might be looking at what you're doing with QBuzz and think that it's a big transition. It's a big, hard pivot from all the things that you've done up to this point. But I've always subscribed to that entrepreneurial notion of everything that we're doing is uniquely preparing us for the things that we're going to do in the future. I'm curious which of those dots connect between your astrophysics background with what you're doing with QBuzz. I'm sure some of that stuff has been transferable.
Yeah, definitely. So there have been a couple of things. I mean, first off, just the just generally knowing the techniques of analyzing a series of data. And I don't want to make it sound nerdy, because the app really tries to make it as easy as possible. This is all going behind the scenes. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed in my astro career and as a software engineer is taking data and making it beautiful. I mean, finding the story that is sort of built into the data. And whether that story is about how a neutron star is consuming a companion star that's orbiting around it, or it is about the usage of Google Drive or time, or it's about how you are feeling from day to day or from moment to moment. All of these things ultimately can be analyzed with similar tools and can be visualized in similar ways to find patterns. So that really is how I got there, just this idea of data visualization and looking at how things change.
When I hear you talk about patterns, my head goes, I was an economics and finance major in school, and I loved econometrics. And so often in econometrics, it was a question of what type of data can we get our hands on. And of course, we all know about qualitative and quantitative data. Probably a lot of people listening, Jake, haven't used longitudinal surveys in their life or in their business. What sort of data can be encapsulated within there? Because it's easy to think about, like my Apple Watch, for example. When I finish a bike ride, it says, oh, rate how difficult it was. And it's quite subjective, of course. And I choose, easy, moderate, or hard. And I don't know how useful that data is for me. So talk to us about the different types of data that can be usable and useful.
Yeah. So in that respect, I don't get too hung up on that specific coding. Like what your definition of easy, medium, hard workout is going to be different from the next person, and it might even be different for you from day to day. So I'd say two things. One is that you try to have some sort of standard, like I don't know. Well, you have the other metrics like heart rate and such, so you can record those as well to kind of have a numerical standard. Certainly, if you're doing traditional analysis of something changing over time, having numbers is great. Math likes numbers. But even if you don't, even if you are talking about more qualitative measures, I still think it's very useful. I mean, in this particular case, if you are doing a workout, you're keeping the weight consistent, and over time, as you would expect, you're seeing the ratings of that particular workout being easier increasing, well, that's a signal. So you can start looking at the relative of different these buckets that you code answers into to kind of see how things are changing. But even if you're not dealing with numbers, like you can include pictures, you can include the GPS locations, you can include just words, text. Those also are things that will be useful a little bit farther down the line. One of the next steps that I really want to work on in QBuzz is incorporating AI into the analysis pipeline. Now, I like this for a couple of reasons. One, we're all thinking about AI, possibly scared. And as I mentioned earlier, the tech companies are using it to understand so much about us. But here's a chance to actually be able to use AI for yourself in a way that analyzes your life like these tech companies are doing, but in a way that is totally private and totally personal just to you. So once that AI is incorporated, then we can start looking at, for instance, if you do an evening journal, and maybe you have some numerical ratings of how your day went, but then you also write a few words about how your day was. What's my favorite thing that happened to me today? That's a question that I like to put on my daily rating, just to end with something positive. Certainly, that's not able to be analyzed numerically, but by crunching the text through AI, then you can start to get signals out of that. And that can feed forward into recommendations, little nudges that's where I want to take this app next. That's a little down the road. I need a team before I can start doing that. I'm still a one person operation, but yeah, that's ultimately where I want to go. So to answer your question, yes, I think all of the types of signals that QBuzz can give you will ultimately be useful. At the moment, it is principally the categorical and numerical data that can be analyzed, however.
Yeah, I love the way you answered that, because especially just knowing that you can use rich data types. I mean, when I heard GPS tags, Jake, one of the silly things that I've committed to at some point in the near future is I want to get into running. I hear so much about the runner's high and people who get so much clarity from it. And if you ask me to rate any of my runs, they're all not enjoyable. And so part of me wants to use QBuzz and have a GPS tag and literally just drop a pin and be like, this was the point at which I wanted to quit. Because there's a certain point in my run where I'm just like, no, I'm done. How cool would it be to have various GPS tags over time that show, hey, you know, the first time I wanted to quit, it was a block away from where I live, but fast forward a few months down the line and, you know, now I'm actually enjoying myself. I'm running along the Tampa River Walk and I find myself enjoying it that way. So it's cool for those longitudinal surveys to see that progression over time. And then hearing you talk about AI, I appreciate that, because even from the outside looking in, when I saw your original messaging about being a personal accountability tracker, where my head went was, why not a personal accountability coach and trainer? Because this is something that's possible with AI. When you think forward a little bit, as you've got that growing team, which I'm so excited to follow that journey, how do you picture AI playing into this? Because there's so many powerful elements of it, and I'm sure that it teases your scientific mind as well to think about the possibilities. What do you think is possible when you start incorporating that stuff?
Yeah, so I think that really there are two angles I'm going to tackle initially. The first is that to just help people writing the questions, help people to write questions that are sculpted to their own lives, that are addressing the things they care about, that will get meaningful data. That's hard. I mean, writing a good survey question is actually pretty difficult. So having a language model that is tuned to doing that kind of thing, that's the first obvious step. Help people write their own questions. The second one is, on the analysis side, to be able to find patterns. And actually three. And then the third is, once you have those patterns, to give the nudges, to give the little bit of coaching advice. That, and sort of that's 1, 2, 3 is the order in which I would see that being implemented.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm very excited for that future, because it's probably closer than a lot of us imagine. And I would imagine for you as the founder of this company, you're thinking about all the ways you can bring that to reality and bring it to fruition. With that said, I do want to change gears a little bit and put the spotlight directly on you, Jake, because I'm always so fascinated by what people's entrepreneurial transitions have been like. Because what you're doing with QBuzz sounds a little bit different than working at IBM, sounds a little bit different than all the astrophysics stuff that you've done, and certainly different than working inside of academia. How's the entrepreneurial side of the journey been for you?
It's been interesting. I did not sit down and say, I want to make a business. I sat down and I started writing code, and eventually I had enough code that I thought, wait a second, this could be a business. So it was not perhaps as deliberate or as planned as would have been ideal. However, now that I am where I am, I'm excited to now be starting to get some users. Like I mentioned, the ad campaign is out. I'm starting to build some usership, and then the next thing will be to have some packages that I can market around to venture capital and hopefully get some both business guidance there and some money to start building that team.
Yes, I love that. And anytime I talk to product builders, Jake, I always ask them about their product roadmap, because that's something that I'm so fascinated by. All of us as entrepreneurs are builders, but every great building needs a blueprint and needs that roadmap. We can't do it all right now. What does that look like for you? Is that a deliberate part of your business, or is that something that, because clearly, I mean, you've been programming since you were 9 years old. Is it something that you just play with on the side and then you start rolling some things in? How do you figure out your product roadmap?
So it started off just kind of, tinkering around and sticking things in and seeing what works. But I pretty quickly found that I needed to be more organized. I am not naturally all that organized a person. I'm just let's start writing code. Let's just do it. Whatever. Planning is for business people. That's boring. And then suddenly I was a business person, and suddenly I realized planning is actually really important. So what I have been doing, I've basically been using the tracking tools that I'm familiar with as a software engineer. Basically, you write an issue for every single bug or feature or sub feature that you want to ultimately deliver. And I just started making those. So right now I'm in progress on an issue for this WTE podcast. I track my time with that. So it's really I've been using issue trackers extensively to sort of build out where I wanted to go. That all of my planning is in that.
Yeah, and I love that. So then along those lines, let me ask you about the executive side of your mind and also the executive side of your scheduling. Are there times that you're carving out in the week to do certain things? Because obviously as a one-man show, you have achieved the thing that a lot of people are looking for, which is time freedom. But of course, you want to spend your time in very effective ways. How are you structuring your day-to-day or week-to-week?
It really does vary. I find, well, first off, I use a pretty common coding approach where you break your time into short iterations. In this case, I do a 2-week iteration cycle, and I have goals for that 2 weeks. And of course, I only schedule half of it because half of it is going to be the unknown popping up. But as far as actually like time of day, what to do, it really does depend. This past week the past week and a half or so has been developing marketing materials for this Reddit ad campaign and thinking a little bit about going into this podcast interview. So that was this past week. The week before that, I was writing new features. The week before that, I was fixing bugs. Honestly, being the one person on this, there is a lot of jumping from topic to topic. But the one thing that I personally find helpful is making sure at least the days are reasonably chunked. So if I'm going to be coding, I want to have a coding day. If I'm going to be doing marketing, I want to be doing a marketing day. I find that the cost of rapid task switching is way too high. Again, me personally, but I think that's true for most people. So really trying to chunk the work so I'm doing whatever I need to be doing that day, focusing only on that. That's my key to getting all of this done. That and extensive issue tracking.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice. And I'm going to ask you for one final piece of advice in just a minute. But before we get there, I want to echo that for listeners. You call it chunking. I call it batching. I think it's so important. It's easy to switch gears 500 times throughout the day, from this email to that Slack message to our text messages to the marketing campaign to debugging things. There's so many things that come up throughout the day. Listeners may not know this, but we're a 7-day-a-week show. I only do interviews on Tuesdays. I just batch all of my interviews on Tuesdays, and that's it. And that allows us to be strategic and disciplined and consistent. So Jake, it's really cool to hear how much this factors into your personal workflow as well. And all of that said, the final question I'll ask, I ask it at the end of every episode before you drop your links. First is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you're one of us, you are a fellow entrepreneur yourself, what's that piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
I would say that for me, persistence was really an important ingredient. I've been working on this for a while, and I started off with dreams of, you just get this minimum viable product, and then you're golden, right? If you've got a good product. But no, in this consumer space, it really has required substantial iteration and listening and, trying again and again. And I think finally I'm starting to get some mileage out of it. Finally, I've got a monitor on my wall over there where I'm starting to see the numbers trending upward. It really has just taken a lot of grinding, though. So, yeah, being willing to do the work and being organized about doing that work, and the work will get done. It's almost magical in a way, but yeah.
Yeah, I love that advice for our listeners, because Jake, what I really hear layered underneath that, which is maybe not the advice that we all want, is not only persistence, but an ounce of patience goes a long way as well. And I think it's so important. And you're a testament to that. I love the fact that you have one eye on your metrics, and you know that just by putting the work in and putting it out there and obviously building something great that's useful for other people, that's the way there. So super appreciative of all the work that you're doing. I'm personally very excited to start using QBuzz as well. So for listeners who want to check it out and dive into that and start utilizing, it's such a powerful technique of longitudinal surveys. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Absolutely. So the website is just q.buzz. Type that in your browser, you'll get there. Or go to the Play Store or App Store and just search for QBuzz. Or if you're on Reddit, go to r/QBuzz. We've got our own subreddit.
Ooh, Jake, you even have your own subreddit. All right, count me in for all of that. I'm very excited. And listeners, you already know the drill. We're dropping all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. q.buzz is the website, not q.buzz.com. Just go q.buzz. It's literally so easy. And also, you can just skip all the web stuff and go straight to your phone's app store, and you can find QBuzz there. So find those links down below. Otherwise, Jake, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a real pleasure.